Hello, in this session, we're going to have a look at risk in more detail. Okay, so we're going to look at risk in more detail to understand some of the things we can do through a risk materialization. We've looked at risk in high level view to understand the process and how to manage risk from a point of view, look at the main steps, which I'll just remind ourselves. The main steps, remember, we'll identify, then we need to assess it, then once we've assessed it, we then put some plan. We plan a response. And if it then materializes, we implement that response. Right? Very straightforward, really. Identify, look at the context of the project, look at, therefore, the types of risk we're going to have using cause, event, and effect. Then we assess it from a valuation point of view and from an impact point of view to look at the probability and the impact and proximity as well. Then we need to plan for it, put some response in place. We have people who are going to own the risk, not necessarily the person who's going to actually take the plan and action the plan, that we have someone who will do that. Action the plan, and therefore someone who owns the risk in the first place. Not always the project or program manager, by the way. And then that's it, implement it when we have materialization. What we're going to look at some of the responses we can use now to look at the differentials between them. Okay. Now, remember, we can have threats and we can also have opportunities. Within projects. I look at projects mainly, there's a slight variation between what they see in projects and programs from an opportunity point of view, and etc. We'll explore that when we look at the program side of things a bit later. Just for now, we're looking primarily at projects. So let's look at some of the first responses we have on the threat side. The first one is obviously we can accept the risk. Otherwise, it's pretty low. It might not even materialize, so the probability is pretty low and the impact might be very small anyway. But at the end of the day, part of the assessment is to look at deciding whether there's a value in that particular risk that we might need to spend some money on to manage. Don't like the word mitigate, really. So look at the word manage, okay? And that's quite important because, there's no point spending a lot of money to manage a risk that might not actually have that massive amount of impact on your project. So you just accept the risk itself, right? The other area, of course, is therefore to avoid the risk, right? In other words, so very simple. Don't run the project. That's a little bit drastic, but sometimes that might be the case. If they look at the risk, remember, in business case, right at the very beginning, as you're starting up the project, feasibility, look at the requirement of the project. What is actually happening there is looking at any major risks that are showstoppers. And some of those might be, well, to avoid that, like data migration, for instance, is quite often a key thing. You're going to pull the plug on the project. But during the project, if those risks materialize as well, then you might decide, this is it. We've got to avoid it, kill the project. Normally, you try and find some other way around it. For instance, if you want to travel from A to B, and there's a threat of fog, you avoid the risk by, instead of driving up and getting fog on the road, you take the train, that sort of thing. So you avoid the possibility of the risk coming up and having an impact on your project. Remember, that's the main thing. It's about risk having an impact on me being able to achieve the objectives and realize the beneficial change out of the project. Okay, so it's risk within the project, not afterwards. So we have avoid, right? Now, there's another common one we all understand, right? Do regularly. That's transfer. Transfer is like whatever happens, the impact of that, I'm going to put the onus on somebody else. And we do that through insurance mainly, right? Or we put clauses in the project with contracts to say, well, if this happens, then that's your responsibility. You've got to have to sort of foot the issue and foot the cost of it, I should say, right? So we have transfer. We remove the onus on us to some other third party from a point of view of the impact, quite often financial impact of it, right? Now, the next two are more about managing the risk itself, depending on when it materializes and how we go. So the first thing we can look at is to reduce. And this has an impact on the probability, has an effect on the probability, you should say, and possibly the impact as well, right? So you use the reduce to try and do something up front. This is being proactive, right? So we talk about here being proactive, doing something up front that will hopefully reduce the probability of it happening, maybe stop it altogether, eventually you never know, and certainly try and reduce the impact when it does finally materialize. Things are up and ready, and that usually means looking at the planning, how we do that. Now, sometimes we decide that's not necessarily the best way. We're not sure what's going to happen, so we'll wait. So we have fallback, which is if, i.e. conditional. Right? This only has an impact on, well, an effect on the impact, I should say, an effect on the impact, because you don't change the probability. Because what it's saying is, I'll only do that if the risk materializes. So the probability is it will do itself when it's going to do itself. You're only going to put the plan in place once it's materialized, so you don't have any impact on the probability, only on the impact itself, the effect on the project, or the project in this case. So this is being reactive, right, to the risk. Reactive to the risk, remember, not reactive to a situation that's arisen. That's slightly different. That's looking at issues. We react to issues because we can only react to an issue, because we can only react to it once it happens. Right? If we have an idea that something may happen in the future, i.e. a risk, then we can plan. That's being proactive. And that's when we go through this sort of sequence of events here. Right? Now, the other one we can do in here, which I'm going to write in the middle here, is called share. Now, share actually goes both from a threat and an opportunity point of view. And what we mean by that is that whatever the situation of that risk materializing, right, from a threat point of view, then we're both going to share the impact of the threat, like a rise in fuel hike or something, that the fuel goes up to transfer or transport some equipment somewhere else. Right? So you share that cost, or share the cost of having extra resources in place. Both the supplier and yourself and the project will fund it because it's actually going to be an impact you didn't know about. It might have to get extra resources in. That could be buildings and things, not just people, by the way. Of course, if the prices go down for the fuel, for instance, then you have the opportunity side of thing, because now you're sharing that instead, right? And therefore, you both benefit from the downturn, which is quite useful. Now, on an opportunity side of thing, we have the first one is exploit, right? Exploit. Now, I'm going to put the other one up as well, because there is exploit and there is the enhance. They're slightly different. One is to take a benefit of something that may happen from a positive point of view. There may be a delay in something happening, or a delay in you getting some part of your project through, or getting up and running in the program maybe. So you'll exploit that to try and get something else through that you were looking at doing, and then maybe use that as an opportunity to get your next product out quicker instead. The enhance is taking it one step further. That is pushing that particular mechanism, that risk, to come and materialize itself, so you can take advantage of the fact that something else is in the wings that you want to bring out, or you want to beat the competition, I should say. Have the opportunity to beat the competition. So there's a bit of a difference. One is exploit the opportunity of something happening to give you a benefit, and the other one's actually pushing it through and enhancing and increasing it, or making it happen sooner, for instance, than you would expect. The share one we've seen, and the final one is reject. So it's a bit like avoid here. In a sense, these two are very similar, right? I either avoid the threat or I reject the opportunity, because it might not necessarily be to your best advantage. And something is happening here or whatever, you reject the opportunity because it's not really what you want to do. Maybe not be within your strategic concept or your cultural to do certain things, your cultural understanding to do certain things within programs and projects. So, opportunities to exploit, enhance, or reject, or from a common point of view, share any benefit you may gain, like fuel prices going down and shipping equipment, for instance. We have, on this side, we have fallback, which is reactive. It's conditional. We only put something in place if it happens, so we only run the planning when it happens. Reduce, we're going to do something up front, as well as, therefore, when it happens, if it materializes, we run the plan that we've got in place. Transfer, shift the onus onto some other third party, avoid it, take some alternative action, drastically drop the project if you like, or accept it, just take it on the chin. It's not going to have that massive impact, and we'll just see what happens when we get there. Right? Know the plan in place. So these are the main aspects of risk in a bit more detail on the different types of responses we may have. That's how we manage risk. Remember, manage risk, respond to issues. Manage risk. Right? Hope that's helped to clarify a few areas.